program this morning. There's a lot to talk about this week, a lot to celebrate. I mean, in Detroit, they're dancing in the streets and other places around the country because of the UAW victory at the Big Three. We're going to be talking about that. And then we're going to transition into a discussion of labor's role in the fight for peace, particularly with regard to the terrible genocide taking place in Gaza at the current moment. And then the party, just by coincidence, I think it was Rosanna's idea, we're going to have a peace conference in 1 week. We've been planning for it for several months, and it's shaping up to be a very important event in our political life. And so we're going to be talking about what's going to happen at that conference and what its aims are. And then finally, I think Anita has a prediction for us about the results of the or potential results of the upcoming election in Ohio. And then finally, our mailbag. But let's start with the UAW victory. Rosanna, at Stellantis, at Ford, and at General Motors, they have reached a very important contract victory. I mean, we need them guys negotiating for us. We would be negotiating against ourselves. But there's a 25% wage increase, 11% bonus on signing. They got rid of the two-tier wage contract over the course of the next contract. COLA, cost of living allowances, restored. Rosanna, what struck you most about this strike? I mean, it's really a historic one if you think about it in many different respects. What's your view?
Well, I think it proves what I feel in my heart is that the people united will never be defeated, and the unity of the workers and the determination showed the bosses that they had to give in, that there was no other choice but to give in, otherwise continue to lose more and more of their profits. So I think that it's a big lesson for all workers that unity really brings results. Organizing and uniting really can win in the end.
Organizing and uniting can win in the end. And the uh, solidarity also played a big role. And I know in Ohio, Anita, the
Mhm.
party clubs were very active. Can you tell us a little bit about the kinds of things that the party did to support the strike?
Sure, Joe. We went to the Toledo Club was the first the one of the first plants struck in this stand-up fight strike, which, as you know, struck just a handful of plants at first, and then more later. It was a really unique strategy and a very effective strategy of keeping the big three on out of the loop as far as what was going to happen next. So Toledo assembly plant was one of the largest and one of the first struck. And the Toledo comrades were there with soup and other goodies for the and just spending time with workers on the picket line. Our comrade from Columbus, Dave Hill, went up there to interview people and wrote a number of really great articles about the picket line and also an analysis of why the big three can really could afford this contract that now they are have signed off on. And then we also went to the Cincinnati comrades and Dayton comrades and Columbus comrades went to the GM supply plant in Cincinnati, which was a much smaller a picket line, but we had a really good experience talking with workers there about their hopes for the future. And it was just an amazing and invigorating strike. And I think everyone in Ohio is really, especially in northwestern Ohio, close to Michigan, where a lot of the action takes place. We're just so pumped up by this victory, which it's just an amazing victory that will mean so much for workers outside of the UAW even, and into the future. It really shows the workers how effective unionizing and union solidarity can be.
Not only in Northwest Ohio, but in other parts of Ohio as well. I know that one of the things that's going to happen at the former Lordstown Assembly near Youngstown, where I'm from, is that the battery workers at Lordstown and in other parts of the country are going to be included under the general contract. And that's huge. That's really huge. My heart was just broken when I heard that 3 or 4 years ago that Lordstown Assembly was shutting down, and which meant that basic industry, for all intents and purposes, in Youngstown, Warren area had shut down. It was the last remaining, big plant, and so now hopefully those workers who are working in that battery plant will be able to earn a living wage, and that's so important for that economically depressed community. But Scott, I cited the things that the contract won at 25% uh, wage increase over the life, the 10, what is it, 11% signing bonus, and so on and so forth. Elimination of the two-tier. What stands out for you amongst those uh, economic victories, and politically for you, uh, looking at it from your vantage point? What does the strike represent? That victory.
Well, what stands out most for me is really the elimination of the two-tier system, which was not just economically disadvantageous to newer workers, but was an attack on the unity of auto workers as a whole. Because when you have a two-tier system, people don't have the same amount of sort of stake in fighting for it. And it was really inspiring to see that the union directly identified that from the very beginning as the major central issue, or at least one of the three maybe major central issues of this strike. And they won on it. So over the course of the contract, the folks who are currently in the lower tier, over the course of 3 years rather than 8 years, will be brought up to the to parity. And what does the strike represent? I think we're already seeing what it represents. So Toyota has announced wage increases at its U.S. plants. Toyota plants are not union, but they see the writing on the wall. They know what's happening. So the struggle and the victory of the UAW is already raising conditions there. And strikes like this, these huge strikes of the auto workers, of the Teamsters who didn't have to strike but were ready to, those reshape both the economic and political life of the country as a whole, right? It raises the bar for employers, and it also demonstrates the growing power of the political power of the working class. And that was something that really inspired me in the UAW strike, was to see that the way that the messages, the speeches, the slogans weren't just about the UAW and automakers. It was about the whole working class and the predatory behavior of billionaires and corporations, and the need to stand up and fight back. So I think this is really part of a big political turning point. We saw in the 1930s that the growth and militancy of the labor movement, the growth in organization, was able to kind of redirect the course of the country away from a response to the Depression centered on billionaires to one centered on the working class.
Well, it's a big victory. Congratulations, UAW. Congratulations to the entire working class, because the victory for this union really potentially represents a victory for everybody, particularly if this rebirth, and I think that's what it is, of class struggle trade unionism, of seeing that this is a fight between, as they've been saying, as Brother Fain has been saying, and others, on the one side, the billionaire class, and on the other side, the working class. Ain't none of this middle class talk that you hear from others. And it's the working class versus the billionaire class, the big capitalists, and their interests are, if you think about it, mutually exclusive. And that the spreading of that idea and the adoption of it, we hope. But it's not just the UAW workers. You know, I said last week, you saw it in the Teamsters, you saw it in the nurses, you see it in the nurses, you see it in the airline workers, and so on and so forth. There's a growing postal workers class struggle, spirit, Starbucks workers, Amazon workers, and and that sentiment, that class consciousness, well, once it catches on, ain't gonna be no stopping it. Uh, and uh, and our role is to build unity within it, promote it as much as possible in the general democratic fight, in the general class struggle fight, in the general fight for peace. And peace is a big issue now in Gaza, in the war that is taking place there, in the calls for a ceasefire. And both in this country and beyond, the labor movement is increasingly taking a role to demand a ceasefire. In Belgium, for example, 5 transport worker unions have come together to call for an immediate ceasefire. In Canada, the Public Employees Union called for a demand, halt arms sale, calling on the Trudeau government to do the right thing, demanding a ceasefire. 50 Canadian organizations have joined that call, demanding that the government take action to end Canada's involvement. And here in the United States, we're beginning to see some breaks in the um, wall of silence so far that has enveloped the U.S. trade union movement, Rosanna. Starting with one of the UFCW locals in Washington State, a letter is circulating, co-initiated by that local and the electrical workers and over 1,000 trade unionists around the country have signed it, calling for a ceasefire. That's the beginning of something, no?
Very much so. That's international solidarity as well as understanding that what's happening, not just in Israel and Gaza, is happening all over the world. And once again, the workers have the power to voice and express their dissatisfaction by doing what they can, including refusing to load trucks, refusing to create the bombs, all of those kinds of things. So I think that it's a very good sign. I'm really happy to hear that.
We'll see if the Longshore Union out there in LA and the Bay Area joins suit and refuses to load goods. They did that in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and
That's
it
right.
had a big impact. Anita, um, Corey Bush has put forward a resolution. I believe it's HR 786, calling for a ceasefire, joined by 18 other co-sponsors in the U.S. House of Representatives. Do you think that there are any members of Congress in the Buckeye State who will join suit? And what kinds of activities does the party in Ohio have in mind to bring the pressure on to demand that our elected officials fight for peace, fight for a ceasefire?
Uh, well, that's you're throwing me off with that question. I think we've been so wrapped up in our election that's coming up on Tuesday. We haven't been thinking very far ahead. And honestly, our representatives in the House of Representatives are not the most responsive to their constituents always. But we have some progressive, mildly progressive members of Congress who might be persuaded to go along with that. Joyce Beatty, for example, is my representative in Congress. And then there are some others from Marcy Kaptur might be one. I'm not sure whether we can convince those folks to go along with Cori Bush at this point, but we will try at least asking our representatives or demanding that our representatives do the right thing and call for a ceasefire. I can't see anyone being against a ceasefire. Just like the United Nations passed this resolution, only the United States and a couple of other places, a couple of other, states um, dissented on that. Everyone in the world sees that this is the right thing to do. Have a ceasefire and stop the killing, this ethnic cleansing that's going on in Gaza right now.
Well, there's a demonstration taking place in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, Saturday. It starts at 2 o'clock, and it looks like a whole lot of people are going to show up. There'll be a group of party contingent there, and they'll be, carrying signs demanding a ceasefire. Pressure is growing, Scott, for a ceasefire. I mean, even Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, centrist Democrat that he is, called for a ceasefire recently. Why is that demand so important, in your opinion?
Well, it's important, first of all, because people are being slaughtered. Civilians in Gaza are being uh, not only killed as collateral damage, but targeted. Israel is bombing refugee camps. It's announcing that it's going to target hospitals. Right? It's really important that that stop. Um, it's also important because the United States government is complicit in this. We give plus almost $4 billion of military aid to Israel every year, which is actually just a subsidy to U.S. weapons corporations to hand out weapons. So this is a democratic issue. It's about what's being done in our name with our tax dollars, where they're going, not to help the people of the United States, not to help the people of Gaza, except a pittance of humanitarian aid, but being used to fund corporate profits and keep a war going. So we say ceasefire now as the first step toward protecting the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. We say ceasefire now as a democratic question about what's happening with our money, and we say stop supplying weapons to Israel.
I hear tell, though, that stock prices are going up since the outbreak of hostilities, war. And it's Rosanna, it's a money making proposition. And so there's a lot of pressure from the military corporations and the right to uh, keep the flow of arms going. And how do you counter that?
Well, you unite and fight. I mean, we're seeing it all over the world, and from all walks of life, from different people gathering together to demand that ceasefire, to demand a change. And once again, when people unite, no matter how much these profit uh, hungry people are, um, they're just not going to win. And I think that's why we're seeing some changes in Congress. And Blinken, I think, is over there in Israel trying to smooth things out a little bit. There's just too much of an outcry, and people are becoming much more and more aware of our military budget, its effects, its lack of even uh, what is that, credibility. You know, they don't even have to tell you how they spend the money. And there's a ton of money that's being spent on $17 for a little screw and all of these things that were just being gouged. So I think more and more people are becoming aware, and I think that's also that they're afraid that we're gonna find out all the secrets.
There is a need, and there has been a need for some time to take steps to rebuild the peace movement. And it, up until recently, was in many respects at the lowest point in terms of its breadth and influence, and that it has been in, I don't know, nearly a decade, if not more, maybe since the end of the Iraq War. And the party, as previously announced, is planning a peace conference. It's going to start on the 11th and 12th. It'll be preceded by a PW sponsored town hall. And that town hall is going to focus on the issue of putting people's needs first and not corporate and Pentagon agreed. And then there are going to be a number of workshops and plenary sessions, all of which are designed to uh, come up with a plan of action uh, that will kind of prioritize uh, not only placing working class issues before the peace movement, but involving working class and trade union forces in the peace movement. Uh, you got a group coming from Ohio. Both they're going to D.C. I hear tomorrow, and then I don't know if the same group is coming to New York or a different group is coming. Are the comrades in Ohio excited about the peace conference? And number one, and number two, what do you think the party's special, unique role, if there is one, in the fight for peace generally?
Joe, I think our party does have a unique role, and I'm glad our Ohio comrades will be participating. We have at least, 6 or so folks going to the peace conference next weekend, and we probably have around the same number with some overlap in personnel there going to the march this weekend. So they're very excited. I'm really looking forward to them bringing back what they've learned at the peace conference, and that's what's wonderful about getting people together from across the country. It really gives us some excitement and gives them a chance to inform their comrades here in Ohio what's going on nationally. So I think this is going to be just a great opportunity for that. And they're excited. I think the role our party has, a special role, is in unifying all these different struggles. I know we're going to have labor folks at the peace conference, tying into how labor, and we've seen that today in all across the world, how labor can really play an important role in diverting our funds from this $1 trillion defense budget into solving human problems and serving human needs. I think labor is especially, I think we're especially poised right now to have an impact there, but there will be others in the African American community, the African American Equality Commission, and the Political Action Commission on and specializing subcommittee on immigration. Those groups will be looking at how they can bring that back. And I think in Ohio that's especially important because we have a big immigrant population in Ohio, and they are many of them are firsthand, have experienced the horrors of war firsthand, and their children are experiencing traumatic childhood experiences because of that. So I think we are poised, especially here in Columbus, Central Ohio, where there's a large number of immigrants, a big immigrant population. I think to to get that peace that idea of demilitarizing and using those funds for human needs, I think that will really take hold in Ohio.
Scott, I hear your club in Ithaca is excited about coming, and y'all raised a nice, tidy sum to send the delegates. You had a conversation about it. What do the
Yeah,
rank and file in the party, what are they looking for uh, coming out of that peace conference? Why are they so excited about it?
I think people are excited about this because, for a long time, we've been insisting on the need to struggle for democracy here at home, right? The struggle against fascism, which is still the main kind of strategic framework for what we're doing. But, we haven't had the kind of movement in this country that's capable of contesting the slide of um, the Democratic Party in particular toward an increasingly violent, militaristic foreign policy. And to for the party to kind of take up that banner and say, yes, we are committing ourselves to figuring out how to rebuild the peace movement, so that we're not thinking in terms of what do we have to accept in order to advance the fight against fascism here. I think that's very exciting for people. I know it's very exciting for me. And yeah, we passed the hat just quickly at the meeting. We have 2 delegates from our club. There's a registration fee to kind of equalize the cost of it, to make sure comrades from farther away from New York City can make it. And we raised almost all of the registration fee money for our delegates in the course of about 5 minutes in our club meeting. So yeah, people are excited.
If the Democratic Party, if Joe Biden and them don't reverse course, they're going to lose the election. I mean, their poll numbers have dropped precipitously. I mean, particularly among young people, particularly among Arab, growing numbers of Jewish young people, African Americans. But the only way that they're going to reverse course, Rosanna, if they are compelled to reverse course. We gotta force them to reverse course. We gotta be in the streets, in the trade unions, on the campuses, demanding that they stop, that they demand a ceasefire, that they cut off military spending, and that they do it now. I mean, and it's not if the election is lost. You think things are going to be bad? Things are bad now. Oh my goodness.
Well, you see what Netanyahu's doing, right? That's how bad it'll get. It may be even worse for us. And I think we have to be flooding their phones. We have to be everywhere on the, writing op-eds to the newspapers, just constantly being, after them to demand that they represent us in what we feel is the right way. Otherwise, they know that they won't get reelected or they'll lose elections, and that's what they're after, being elected and being Congress members and all of these kinds of things. But they have to do what we are demanding, and they have to represent us as their constituents. So along with being out in the streets, make sure that you call your member of Congress, senators, write op-eds on your local newspapers, sit in on the offices if you need to. Do those kinds of things are also really important to do. And if there's not much you can do because you've got work and all of these things, just make one phone call. It's very easy. You just call and say, you don't even have to give your name. You just let them know that you're a constituent and that you want a ceasefire, that you want this thing to be turned around.
The bombs dropping in Gaza will explode in Columbus and in Albuquerque and in LA, around the country, and those books that are being banned will be burned all over the country, and abortions will become increasingly limited all across the country. Voting rights will be squashed, and that's just domestically. They'll invade Mexico, probably. That's what they're talking about.
Mhm.
Cuba will be choked. The Maduro government in Venezuela will be overthrown. Probably throw Lula back in jail in Brazil. And that's just the start. So the stakes here, folks, are extremely high. And that's why the key, we have to build movements on the ground to compel big capital, whether it be Democrat or Republican, in this case it's Democrat, to change course. And that can be done. And that is being done, and we have to be part of it. Let's move the discussion. Uh, Anita, what's your prediction for Tuesday?
Well, I think we have, as you know, we have an amendment to the state constitution on as issue one on our ballot, and that is to restore reproductive rights, basically restoring the rights that we had under Roe to Ohio residents, putting it into the Constitution. Um, and it looks good for that. The polls say 57, 58% in favor. We just have to get out the vote and make sure people get to the polls on or before next Tuesday. But it's very contentious right now. I saw a little bit of television this morning, and there were back-to-back ads, one saying vote no, one saying vote yes. There's also some confusion because we had another issue one in August, but it's been ever since July or so when they decided to have that August election. We've had just nonstop political activity here in Ohio to get those rights restored. And I am arguing to everyone that this is a vote directly against fascism because it is really restoring rights that women should have control over their own bodies. So it's a crucial vote, and I think we'll be successful. And I hope they'll be successful as well in Virginia and Pennsylvania and Mississippi and other places where voting is taking place. Kentucky, where voting everywhere seems to have at least an indirect effect on women's reproductive rights going forward. So good luck, everybody. Get out and vote if you haven't voted yet.
And your prediction of the vote?
Oh, I
57,
think
49?
we'll win. I think we'll win, and I think marijuana will be recreational marijuana will also probably be legalized, but that's a law, not an amendment, and that could be overturned by the legislature. But I doubt they would do that if it passed by a lot. But um, we're hoping that those races come out the way we want. And there's a lot of school board elections going on, and other local elections. So it's an important one for Ohio.
Well, we wish you luck, and
For win.
we'll come back to it next week and celebrate with you. Let's deal with our mailbag question. We got an interesting one this week. Socialism, our writer says, is broadly defined as more centralized government control. We want to control everything. Well, I agree with the party. I'm not sure about that. I do not believe our current U.S. government or the politicians are competent enough to work in a socialist government. Does that mean that they're not controlling enough? I'm not sure what the writer has in mind there. So, how is this going to work? Scott?
Well, I would start by contesting the idea that socialism is equals centralized government control. Socialism is the political and economic power of the working class. It's working class control over the economic and political life of the country. It's the transformation of society along working class values of equality and solidarity rather than greed and competition. That often involves centralized planning of the economy. Um, so it's not the anarchy of the market. Uh, but in terms of the government, what it's going to be under socialism, there's going to be a lot of changes. One class, as the working class, as Marx said, can't just take hold of the ready-made system and use it to its benefit. We have to change things around. So that will look like, getting rid of the electoral college and changing the legislature so that we don't have one house that's entirely, that's not based on equal representation. And it also means bringing the working class into positions of power. So we're gonna clean house, and we'll have politicians that come from the working class, who understand, who represent the working class. That's my answer.
Rosanna, I think it was Will Rogers once said that we got the best Congress, best government money can buy. Are they competent enough, or in your opinion?
That's a funny quote. Uh, no, of course not. They're not. Their interest, most of them, their interest is not the working class. But I think there's examples in Latin America that we can look to for some lessons about how to establish governments, participatory systems, changing some of the uh, even the structures, and changing some of that structure that really is set up will can set up a more equalized government, and where working people have a say, and there is none of this popularity contest, but really representatives that meet the people's needs, that have the interest of the working people. I think initially is important.
Having the interest of the working people is most important. And Rosanna has the last word. We are for working class power. That's what socialism is going to consist in, and workers run the economy, and that puts us in a best position to run the government. And we've learned a lot, and there are a lot of workers in the government, by the way. There are, and and they will be on our side when a new socialist system comes in. At least most of them. I'm so sure some of them are going to go over to the other side. That's inevitable, but most will be on our side. Until next week, stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight. Do what you can to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, and we'll be with you next Friday on the eve of our peace conference. Until then, take care, everybody. Bye now.
Welcome,
Bye.
comrade.
Bye.